it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Welcome to Her Success Story. And it is a great episode today. A really, really fascinating, interesting woman leader that I have the fortune to be connected to through my networking and relationship building. And there's always a tip for you as you build your relationships out there. There's many, many wonderful opportunities and interesting people to meet. And this is how today I'm introducing you to Jules Pieri. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Grommet, a site that has launched more than 3,000 innovative consumer products since 2008. The company's citizen commerce movement is reshaping how products are discovered, shared, and brought. I'm really interested in hearing about the evolution of the Grommet and how the impact of it is in today's business. Jules' background is she's a brilliant woman, graduate of the University of Michigan, went on to be one of the known first designers to graduate from Harvard Business School. She's a mother of 3 grown adult boys at this point. She was named one of Fortune's most powerful women entrepreneurs in 2013 and one of Goldman Sachs' 100 most interesting entrepreneurs in 2014. Jules is a recent author. Her book came out in April of this year, 2019, and it is How We Make Stuff Now, Turn Ideas into Products That Build Successful Businesses. Jules, welcome, and thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks, Ivy. Happy to be here.
So, always curious to talk about, when we're young and we're ambitious and we're growing our careers, we have all these visions for ourselves. Based on those visions that we have early in our lives and based on you building out the Grommet, how did you get from there to here?
Well, I can't say I had a lot of vision for myself, so let's start there. Because I grew up in a blue-collar household and ended up being the first person in my family to go to college. So I think it was more of a game of inches for me in that I wouldn't have even known many people in business, right? I only knew people pretty much in the trades, and that wasn't something I expected for myself. So my first toehold was academia, very classic, pull yourself up from the bootstraps story of, I think I better do well in school. And I did that. I was an artsy nerd and throughout junior high and then high school. High school is pivotal for me because I had a teacher who told me about a very good boarding school that I got a scholarship to. And I would say that was the foundation for my having more vision for my life. It started there. But the next rung on the ladder for me still was just college. I mean, for somebody with my background, that was a big accomplishment. And figure out how to get there, figure out how to get paid for. Again, scholarships, a lot of heroes in my life, people who paid for me to have an opportunity.
And I think that's interesting because, I'm going to kind of throw us together here. Slater Success started in 2008 as well. And when we chatted a little bit, our kids are probably around the same age, et cetera. My parents didn't go to college. We're of that generation that it's not unusual for our peers to be first college educated, and the impact that has on us in building our futures forward.
Well, I think what's great about it is you learn early on. It's all up to you, right? I mean, your family can be as loving and caring and encouraging as possible, but they can't really help you pick a college, apply to college, study for exams, pick your classes, pick a career. They just can't if this is outside their experience. So you learn to trust yourself, and every time you take a little risk, you develop a little bit more confidence. I call it your confidence muscle. Every time you face a fear, walk through it, nothing bad happens, or if it does, you didn't die, nothing, terrible happens. you get confidence. So I think that helps. You know, you became an entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur. I didn't see that coming particularly, but I think it helped me understand that I had a chance of doing it.
So in building, in this idea, so if Grommet opened in 2008, when was the concept, the idea start percolating, and how did this evolve for you?
Well, the idea for the opportunity came to me well before I did anything about it. I was working in a big company. I was consulting at Play School, and I noticed that our best products, new ideas, never made it to market. And our product line was even shrinking, which made zero sense. And I went to my boss at the time and said, "What's going on?" And she said to me, "Well, if Kmart, Target, Toys R Us, Walmart don't want it, it can't get made." And that was the lightning bolt. Like, what? That's just ridiculous. We have wonderful R&D capability, and 4 toy buyers are deciding what kids can see from Play School. So I knew there's a problem in the market. Now, fast forward to when, just before I started the Grommet, I had just left a role as president of a social network. This company competed with LinkedIn, so they won, we lost. But I was definitely a pioneer in that media and understood, wait a minute, that thing that was bothering me before, I could skip right over toy buyers and create my own community, take the product straight to the people with media. So that was, how I got there.
I think it's very interesting, because when we talk about businesses that succeed or businesses that solve a problem in the marketplace. And when we look at visionaries are people who actually could say, okay, what's going on in the marketplace? What is working? And most importantly, what is not? And then how do we solve that problem? And that sounds exactly like your approach in the early stages of the Grommet, based on your background, which was a beautiful background between the Play School and the knowledge you gained there, and then the insight in social media.
Yes. So the problem that I knew needed solving was more of a B2B problem. I understood that there were wonderful products that would never see the light of day because of retail's increasingly large scale and conservatism. And I knew that problem would get larger and larger because the internet alone was enabling more and more people to create products, credible products, better products, and then other technologies and platforms like crowdfunding. So there was going to be this huge B2B opportunity. The bet I had to make was harder was, would people care? Because somebody had to buy these products, right? And I didn't know, I couldn't quantify that people would care about more innovative products or products with values or products from small companies, which are all the fundamentals of the products we launch. And that was the bet I had to place.
So what have been in building the Grommet? You're in your 11th year. What has been some of the challenges that you've navigated? That I'll always say, challenges show up as, oh, we have a problem, we have a challenge, we have an obstacle, but it also shows up as opportunity. So what are some of the interesting things that you have observed?
I would like to say that our challenge presented an opportunity, but I don't really have that perspective, because our biggest challenge was funding during our first, always, but our first 4 years in particular. And it did have a positive side to it, to be living on very thin capital for much of our existence. It meant that we focused very hard on what mattered in creating distinction and competitive positioning and defense. And that's a good discipline for any startup to, we just never had anything to waste. And it stood us in good stead. Essentially, the first 4 years of the business were that phase. And since then, we've had either, self-funding or more reasonable funding from a strategic investor. So that discipline was good. It was just a little long. I mean, no startup should be in starvation mode for 4 years. That took exceptional tenacity and exceptional commitment by the team that was there for that time period. After that, I mean, honestly, Ivy, once we had, realized our survival, the business challenges to me were like child's play. And I'm not arrogant about that because I still have to work hard to get through them. But comparing will we survive versus how do we figure this out, there's no comparison. Like I can always figure something out, or someone in the company can, or find someone who knows something that we don't know. So I kind of see it like every day showing up for those is like showing up for some kind of sports match. Like, what it'll be today, I don't know. Who will be opposing us today? What field we'll be on? But we're trained for this. That's how I always feel about the business side.
So when I was looking at the Grommet site, you have so many areas. I saw your kids area, which is, a testament to your early stages of preschool and making sure other things get to market. So it's in categories of the different, women, men, beauty, kids, all of that. But then you have another area that's really interesting. And that's, when I look at, crowdfunding, when we look at, corporate or sustainable products, where did that evolution come around?
That was day one, actually. That was part of the bet I said we had to place. Like, would people care about products with values, articulated, clear values, like you mentioned, like sustainable living or products that come from an underrepresented entrepreneur. So we started with about 5 or 6 of them, and we have 10 represented on the site now. Along the way, a couple of them came along. We like underrepresented entrepreneur. That means senior citizens, that means students, that means women, people of color, veterans. Like, we didn't really realize that should be called out as important. And we didn't realize that people would like lifetime guarantees, like that would become a movement among people. And so we have made for lifetime as a value. But some of them we knew right from the beginning, like sustainable living or made in the USA. Crowdfunding didn't exist when we started, so we added that one later. But right from the beginning, I feel like you get one life. And if I could, use mine better, that would mean supporting companies with values that initially we cared about, but we made sure along the way that other people cared about them too. That mattered.
And how wonderful it is to do business, support business, and buy from businesses that are aligned with your own values.
Yeah, and again, that was the bet. I remember this is 2008 when we launched. It was a very unsettling, terrifying time. We were losing, rightly, some trust in large institutions. Our banks were scaring us. A lot of our large companies were threatened, which threatens people's livelihoods. And we had some government foibles in terms of getting into wars and, some problems with regulation, things that we all had good reason to be upset about. And one thing I knew was that people perennially in the Pew Charitable Trust survey trust small businesses. And I thought, it's not that people are suddenly cynical, jaded, and, they're going to just wash their hands of hope. I just thought they needed a source for, a focus for that. Like, well, okay, if I can't trust the guys that have let me down, who could I trust? And I knew small business would be standing there ready to respond to that.
What has surprised you in this journey?
I didn't realize, I knew I had some tenacity. I knew, I'd started demonstrating that as a young age. I guess when I sent myself to boarding school, that was my decision, my initiative. I knew I had some of it, but I didn't realize how much I had in the beginning. I think I also, my kids, when I started the business from middle school to high school, and it kind of snuck up on me how important my identity as an entrepreneur became to them. Like at one point when the company, we had 3 like near-death experiences, and the last one I figured I had to tell my kids. It was really close. And I told my youngest son, who was probably about 15, and he gave me this like pep talk, like the kind I would give him. Like, he had no idea what he's talking about, but basically Mom, you can do this. You just like you tell us. And that talk meant more to me than anything an investor could have said. So I never expected to have the emotional ballast I got from my family for doing some of the hard things I had to do. Not pressure, it was support. I never experienced this pressure other than obvious financial pressure, because that was huge for me. But no, that was just life. I never expect my kids to matter so much in helping me.
I could definitely understand that and feel that. And it's interesting as, you know, very often the expression goes out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah.
And when your kids start seeing what you're doing in their way, my own kids in the last couple of years have come to me and said, "Oh, Mom, can you have a conversation with their, you know, making some, and you know, business decisions, company decisions, life decisions, whatever it is." And for when your kids to show up for you and they have that trust.
Yeah.
And I truly believe out of the mouths of babes, they come to support you, and I'll always say, so I'll get clearer on this. Okay. We teach our kids so much when we don't realize what we're teaching them.
Yeah.
And our parents have taught us many things when they didn't realize what they were teaching us. And we end up teaching our kids so much when we don't realize. And that is in the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know? Yeah. It's all the great things. There's some kind of ugly things there. And there's some brilliant things there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think your reference to your kids either asking for advice for themselves, or I think you also meant for their friends. Like I've had a lot of that request through my sons to help their friends with career decisions. And I think, you know, for teenagers and young adults, their friends are probably, you know, more important in some ways in terms of influence at that stage. And so when their friends say, "Hey, your mom gave me great advice," they're proud of that. You know, they like to affiliate with that. In fact, this weekend, my three sons are thinking about doing a business thing together, making a collective small investment. And my middle son said to me, I was going to go along for a meeting, and he said, "You can only come if you talk," because I tend to, like, you know, let them make their own decisions and I don't intervene that much. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, your advice is the advice I care about most in the world. So you need to talk." Mm-hmm. And I gave him a big hug because I was like, "What?" I had no idea. He's very bullheaded, this son of mine. So I had no idea he felt that way. And I appreciated him saying it.
It's always wild and interesting what comes out as, you know, mothers who own businesses, mothers who are successful leaders, whether it's in a career, whether it's in a business, it doesn't matter. But when our children reach adulthood and you can have adult business conversations as opposed to the teenage adult conversation, which can sometimes you're on two different pages or two different priorities, is great insight. And it goes both ways, because I think there's an enormous amount we are able to learn from the younger generations and their perspectives in business that are truly enlightening. And what they are now ready as adults to value what their parent leaders, their parents who are also business leaders, you know, have to say.
That's so true. I do rely on them for that. And I've been lucky because a lot of my career is tracked with where they were in life. Like when I worked at Keds and Striderite, we made shoes for little kids and babies. Like they were in that phase. So I had a pretty intuitive understanding of what was in the market. And then when I moved to play school, they were playing with toys. When I moved to the social network, they were, you know, the kids were faster to adopt that media. So they were more helpful than my adult friends. This business is probably the least clear connection, except that we have a lot of millennial customers and employees. So especially on the employment front, I rely on them because I'm learning, what does their company do? I borrow good ideas. Like we started a sabbatical program where after 5 years you get a paid month off with a small travel stipend. Well, I totally stole that from my youngest son's employer. And, and because he was there and I know people there, I could call him and ask the COO, does it work? Is it a good idea? And they're a much bigger company, so my son was a route to a really important benefit at the Grommet.
It's so true. So let me ask you this. After all you have done, what drove you to become an author?
An author, I wrote How We Make Stuff Now because I've been watching 3,000 companies launch 30,000 products with our help. And I've seen all the success and all the mistakes that could come their way. And I decided to put that all in one place because we kind of ad hoc consult to our companies we work with based on what we've seen. Why not make it easier? Put it in one place. So it's a bit of a give back to the emerging maker community. It's a thank you to our existing makers. It's also, for me personally, I guess, was always a bit of a bucket list item. And so there was that, but that was a distant third to the other two.
So if you have one or so, a strong tip, I'll put it this way, a strong tip to give to women and men who are looking to start businesses, who are looking to up-level where they are in their careers, what guidance or tips would you share with them?
Well, I try to avoid regrets. So that means walking through the fear that I would have about a difficult decision. So if you're going to do something hard, whether it's ask for a promotion or change companies or start a company, there is nobody who has no fear about that. We all have fear. And what's different between the people who get what they want or get where they want and the ones who don't are people who can walk through it. And the walking through it is what means you end up with no regrets, because if you've tried, you can fail. I've never had regret over failing. I would only regret not trying. And it sounds so simple, sounds so basic, but I do see a difference in people who can walk through that fear and try it. And I find it's physically upsetting for me when I'm facing one of those, like my stomach churns. So I know, I'm feeling what I'm supposed to feel. I don't like it, but it's there. But my head helps me sort it all out. So I'll play a game with myself. Like, okay, you want to do this thing. What's the worst thing that could happen? Mm-hmm. And usually if you can think of that, it's really not devastating. The worst thing that could happen. Like I
have to tell you, Jules, I love that game.
You play that game too?
Oh, you know what? My father taught me in my 20s. I had all these business ideas, all these things I was going to do. And my father never did college. He did build a beautiful business, and he was an entrepreneur himself. And he said, "This is how you have to think about things, Ivy. You need to take a piece of cheese." I was like, okay, I'm not quite sure I'm getting this, but let's roll. I was pretty young. I was in my 20s. And he goes, you have to look at everything that can go bad and everything that's going to close that company, everything that's going to go wrong, everything that's going to go bad, everything horrible that can happen in doing this. The reason the doors are going to close, you're going to lose all the money in the world, everything that's going to, and he goes, and every time you identify something that's going to go wrong, you poke a hole in the cheese. I was like, okay. And he said, at the end of the day, after you've poked all your holes, if you actually have Swiss cheese and it's edible, open the doors.
Oh, I love that.
And yes, so I'm 100% along with you. Find everything that goes, I'm going to lose all my money. What's the worst case scenario? Can I make money back? Can I get a job? Will I live on the street? Do I have somebody to live with? What are all the things that can go bad? Every time, if it was changing a job to, opening a new business, changing a career, doing a merger, everything that can go bad. And then you said something early on, Jules, that was so true for me. It's just make the decision. you can make your next decision, but always the longer you stay in indecision, the more you suffer.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And, make the decision. You can always make the next decision that makes the decision better and better and better.
Right.
Or you could take a decision that maybe wasn't so good and you'll improve it. It's okay. Yeah. You still have your Swiss cheese.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is people think they need a 5-year plan, and I admire people who do, but I've never been able to see beyond, say, 18 months, and that's fine with me. Like if I'm around good people and doing things where I can learn, or I'm building something I care about, that's fine. And if I'm not, at times when I found myself not in that situation, then the real action starts. Like let's do something about this. So in 18 months, I won't be here.
So it's interesting you say that, because I was working with a client earlier today. And when we talked about the 5-year plan, like she immediately froze. And I was like, okay, we're not looking at a 5-year plan. We're looking at a plan right now for the end of 2020, which is that 18-month plan, right? That 1.5-year plan. So what we're looking at is a 5-year life vision. What do you want your life to look like based on what the decisions you're making now? So I look at a 5-year life vision for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Business, back in the day when I started my first company, a 5-year plan was a different story than we have, in my opinion. This is based on Ivy, the science of Ivy. This is not written anywhere, not even in my own books, but this is science of Ivy. In 5 years, business is evolving so rapidly. Like when we look at this, social media and the evolution of social media, when we look at online shopping versus, 5 years ago, business is evolving so rapidly that I think a 5-year plan business-wise is more challenging, but a 5-year life vision to build your business plan for that 1.5 years, I think is beautiful.
I can give you an example of that in my life. I haven't thought of it exactly that way, but I'm operating that way. I would like to be I'm on a nonprofit board. I'd like to be on 1 or 2 for-profit boards within 5 years. And I don't have a lot of time for it right now, so I'm in no big hurry. But once a week, I do something that advances that cause. And it's usually something pretty small. An email to somebody, a phone call, saying, hey, this is on my radar. In fact, saying that on this podcast is that for me this week. That's all I need to do. Like, your listeners know I want to be on a for-profit board. That's it.
Love it. How can our listeners at Her Success Story follow you, know more about the Grommet? Tell us how to be in touch, how to stay tuned to what's happening with the Grommet and Jules Pieri.
Sure. All my social handles are just my name. So it's Jules and P like Peter, IERI. And the Grommet is literally the, and Grommet, Gromm, like Mary, ET. So we're pretty easy to find. So and Instagram, Twitter, I have a blog under my name. You just search us and we have good SEO. You'll find us.
And all listeners always know all that information is in our show notes. So take a look, take a sneak peek. Feel free to connect with the Grommet. There's some great, great products on there. I will tell you, I was on there a little bit shopping myself, as well as following Jules as well and her new book. Jules, share a little bit of the name of the book and where that resource is.
Sure. It's How We Make Stuff Now, and there's a website by that same title, or you can find it on the Grommet or any place else you might buy books.
Fabulous. Listeners, remember to subscribe to Her Success Story. We will be in your inbox every week. Jules referenced, interestingly enough, potentially being on a for-profit board. We just concluded a series not that long ago of the impact of women on boards. You might want to give a couple of those a listen to if you perked up on that and gained some insight and information. Thank you. Feel free to leave comments. Jules, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ivy. I really appreciate the chat.
See you next time.
To shine.